This week on The Record, what is the State of the Union? Senator Eric Schmidt weighs in on the economy, immigration, and energy independence. It's Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, the rematch. Which candidate will win over independent Nikki Haley voters? Political analyst Anita Mannion breaks it down for The Record. And will the real candidates please stand up? Why so many elected offices remain uncontested? It's all coming up right now. Welcome to The Record. I'm Mark Maxwell. President Biden and Donald Trump are on a collision course for November. So what is the State of the Union in this fourth year under President Biden? As you might expect, Republicans and Democrats hold very different views on that. Joining us now is U.S. Senator Eric Schmidt on The Record. The Dow Jones and S&P 500 hit record highs this year. GDP hit a record high recently, and unemployment also recently hit a 54-year low. So if you're grading the economy, you would say the State of the Union is what?
Are you his speechwriter?
No, Senator, those are just facts.
If you care about working families and actually what they're feeling every week when they go to the grocery store, Joe Biden's economy has been a disaster for people. When you spend trillions you don't have and declare war on domestic energy production, the cost of everything goes up, and that's what we're seeing. And so, working families, like I said, are spending $10,000 more a year for the same stuff that they were just 3 years ago. That's real. Those are numbers that impact working families who are struggling to make ends meet. And so I think you combine that with a border that's wide open, you combine that with an energy policy that puts America last. Joe Biden, I would expect, is going to try to blame everyone but himself. The truth of the matter is the blame lies with him.
You mentioned inflation, immigration, and energy production. Let's start with that inflation. You mentioned high prices, and yes, they have gone up. But according to central banks and global governments, America enjoys the 8th lowest inflation rate across the world. Are you saying that global inflation is Joe Biden's fault, or is there any credit for the U.S. surviving inflation better than most?
17% increase since he's taken office, and it's cumulative. And so I don't represent a European country. I represent the state of Missouri here in the Capitol to advocate for them. And the working families that I represent, they're paying more for everything. And it doesn't need to be that way. If we actually controlled spending and we opened up energy production, preventing our liquefied natural gas being exported to places like Europe, where we could be energy dominant to help our friends and allies over there and actually, create good paying jobs here. That makes no sense to me. Shipping jobs overseas to China because of this ridiculous climate alarmist agenda, as opposed to having those jobs here and opening up American energy production here, makes no sense to me. So those are the kinds of things that affect real people that I represent. So they're not seeing it the same way you do. And every week they go to the grocery store, that's the proof.
You talk a lot about energy independence. I was just reading a chemical engineer who recently wrote in Forbes magazine that America marked the highest level of U.S. energy independence under President Biden since any time before 1950. Similar facts were also published in research from Citibank. So how exactly do you define energy independence? And if we're making more oil now than we ever did under President Trump, is that a bad thing?
Well, there's a few things that are going on. One is our strategic petroleum reserve, which we sold off to China to help his re-election effort, is very dangerous. It's at the lowest level we've seen in decades. That's a serious issue. The price of oil, of course, has gone up since then. So if you want to replenish that, that's going to cost us more. We could be the world's largest exporter. And by the way, I'm all of the above on energy sources. I think that the fact that the government is subsidizing, electric vehicles when people don't want to buy them is displacing auto workers. It's why President Trump's doing better in places like Michigan than Joe Biden. I think people have blinders on if they don't see how this disastrous and backwards policy where we buy materials from places like China to build these electric vehicles here that nobody wants, or very few people want, there's not a market for, is hurting American workers. And so from my point of view is open it all up and let's be the biggest exporters in the world of our energy, and it'll create jobs, it'll bring prices down and everything, and that'll help real people.
All right, on immigration, President Biden has criticized Senate Republicans for scrapping Senator Langford's immigration proposal. I understand, we've discussed before, you think the president and federal agencies created the problem or at least bungled it. But you had a chance to tie the president's hands here. You could have said asylum seekers must go through ports of entry. You could have raised the threshold or restricted his use of parole. Why meet his inaction with inaction?
Because he has all the authority he needs right now, Mark. This is one of the biggest sort of lies that's been put out there. Joe Biden has issued 90 plus executive orders undoing the successes that President Trump had, most famously remain in Mexico. In December of 2020, we had the lowest level of illegal immigration we've seen in this country in 40 plus years. Now we have record highs. And so you don't need to look very far. If Joe Biden wanted to fix the problem, he could just reverse his disastrous executive orders and get back to enforcing existing laws. The truth is, though, he doesn't want to do that. That's not where the Democrat Party is right now. The White House is populated by the open borders crowd. They think these lines are arbitrary. And we're sending people into all places of the country, Mark. We don't know who they are. They're being given court dates in the 2030s. No country in the history of the world has ever done anything like this. And so I know he'll try to, pass the buck and blame other people. But the truth is, the same laws that existed under President Trump exist now. If he enforced them, we'd have a secure border.
I guess I just struggle to understand legislators who don't want to legislate. If you're slamming shut this window of opportunity at a time when you've got leverage over President Biden.
Well, here's the deal, Mark. The leverage is secure the border. Secure the border, and then let's talk. The other thing is, what you're arguing is that bill actually moved the ball forward. Are there things that we could do to improve immigration laws? Yes, but the truth is that bill didn't do it. It created new asylum agents at the border who could fast pass citizenship at the border. We've never done anything like that before. It also took jurisdiction away from Texas, where these claims have typically been adjudicated because it's in a border state, and moved it to guess where? The DC Circuit Court of Appeals in Washington, D.C., a notoriously liberal court. So the bill took us backwards, not forwards. I'm all for talking about ways to improve things, but the truth is Joe Biden has the authority to secure the border now. It's a red herring to say that he doesn't.
All right, we're out of time. Thanks. A raucous caucus. Why one Republican voter felt intimidated after trying to cast her vote this weekend. Former President Trump dominated the Missouri caucuses and primary night on Super Tuesday. But can he convince Nikki Haley, Republicans, and independents to back his bid for a second term? We talked to one Missouri woman, Barb Reeder, who went to the GOP caucus and told us the disorderly way the event was managed and the way Trump's supporters treated her as she tried to engage the civic process there turned her off and turned her away from him, but turned her on to another idea.
It seemed like the people running it were very proud that there was a line of people standing outside. Which was probably a little bit longer than you would have seen on any voting day, which was good. But on the other hand, if you didn't get in by 10 o'clock, you couldn't vote, you couldn't participate. So yeah, it was great that those people were there, but the percentage of people that was there was minimal compared to the number of registered voters that could have voted. So that was the start of it. I guess once we got inside, you could not participate unless I pledged to support the Republican Party. And they verified who I was and all that kind of stuff, which was fine. But once we got in...
Do you consider yourself a Republican? I don't know.
Some days. I mean, I'll be very honest. I mean, I've voted Libertarian, I've voted Democrat, and I've voted Republican in my life.
So maybe an independent.
Yeah, but independents don't get to vote in the primary. So if you don't at least attach yourself with some party for the primary, you don't get to vote.
What message does that send? How does that leave you feeling?
It tells me that they don't really want to hear what I have to say. If I don't toe the line, then my thoughts aren't worth listening to. It's just very frustrating. It's very sad. I found out that this was going to be a caucus listening to the news, and we were sitting here listening, and after the Iowa caucus, and they said, oh, and the Missouri caucus is on such and such a day, and we looked at each other and we went, Missouri doesn't have a caucus. And so from there, we wound back the TV and said, well, that sure as heck is what they said. Missouri's got a caucus. So we went through that. We got online. We did a lot of digging, and we found out, yeah, there's a caucus. And then we found out, okay, it's a certain day at a certain time. I talked to a lot of my friends that I work with and said, hey, are you going, do you know we have a caucus? And they said the same thing we did, is Missouri doesn't have a caucus. Missouri has a primary.
It caught you off guard.
It caught me very much off guard. And I guess and I guess it's shame on me, but it's also shame on the news. And I should know what's going on, but I get in my email every day and across the TV every day, breaking news this, breaking news that. There was never a breaking news that I can remember that said they took your vote away. And that's what a caucus does. It takes your vote away. Unless you can participate on that specific day for that entire specific time, you can't vote. So active military can't vote, a mom who needs a babysitter for her kids can't vote, somebody that works on Saturday can't vote. Your vote doesn't count.
It might be your feeling that betrays the promise of what the American government is supposed to be, something that takes our collective views into consideration and doesn't shun them.
Well, that's exactly what I think. I mean, the process was a primary, and we said, Missouri saved $10 million by not sponsoring the primary. So, and they said, and they're very proud that they saved $10 million to do that. But what they did is say, okay, Democrats, you do what you want. Republicans, you do what you want. You other guys, well, we don't care what you do want. And it just, the whole process from the state legislature on down, not just the Republican Party and the caucus, is changed to say, we don't want your input.
And there's a lot of peer pressure involved.
Yeah, on Saturday when we actually, got the vote for Haley, I mean, there's a gymnasium full of 558 people, if I remember correctly. And all the Haley delegates were asked, or supporters were asked to step to the middle of the floor. And so now you've got 60-some people surrounded by 500 people who don't want you there. I believe there's a rule about intimidating voters. I felt intimidated. I know it wasn't a vote, but I sure as heck felt intimidated.
After your experience on Saturday, do you feel more or less likely to vote for Donald Trump?
I'm a little uncomfortable answering this question because I don't want people to think this is a Trump versus Haley thing. This is an involvement thing. My t-shirt didn't come, but I had ordered a t-shirt from Haley that said permanently barred. I mean, he permanently barred the Haley supporters from the Republican Party. I mean, if that's how the Republican Party feels about us, then should they be surprised if all those voters went to Biden? I'm struggling with what do good people do next. Good people need to be more involved. I need to be more involved. The people that love this country need to be more involved because we're letting a lot of people railroad us and we need to stand up.
You can always catch our extended interviews up online. Just visit ksdk.com. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We turn now to our political analyst, Anita Mannion, who's joining us with reaction to the Missouri caucuses. And you look a lot at voter turnout, voter engagement, involvement. We heard some criticism about the number of people who could actually participate and the general relative turnout. Caucuses typically don't draw as many people as an election would. What did you make of the way all this unfolded, this return to the caucus?
Yeah, well, there was some contention around this decision in the first place that the Missouri State Legislature made to move from the primary election, where you go cast a secret ballot and go about your day, to a caucus, where you have to be at a designated place at a designated time, publicly declare your opinions, and all those things lead to lower turnout.
One of the people we heard from said, this took my vote away. It was imprecise. One analogy, or one anecdote rather, from St. Louis County was that they had measured 619 people in the room, or 916 people. I think I transposed those numbers. And when the votes were all counted, there were like 80 more votes total. They double counted people. It wasn't exactly a precise science.
Caucuses are known for that. If you remember back in 2016, a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters were getting upset about caucuses, and sometimes they come down to a coin toss. How long do they go? And so it's just a messier process. It takes more time. It's more public. There were questions about accessibility during this process. And so it's not very popular with voters. So I think it'll be interesting to see if the legislature decides to change this between now and 2028.
A problem for 4 years from now.
That's right.
Now we're focusing on 2024. And Super Tuesday's results are in. Nikki Haley is out. How are American voters feeling in general about this rematch of Donald Trump versus Joe Biden?
Not happy. This is a very unpopular rematch. There are very few voters who are excited about this. You might be excited about one of the candidates, but not about the rematch. And so that can also suppress turnout for the general election.
There's been a lot of talk about Donald Trump's exit polling from the Nikki Haley voters. Can he woo them and win them over? From what you've seen so far, what is his challenge in bringing them back into the fold?
A lot of these voters were voters he had challenges with in 2016 and 2020, the suburban women, more moderate voters, college-educated voters, and that's where Nikki Haley did really well with conservative policies, but a more moderate tone. And so I think that it's going to be a challenge for Donald Trump to win them back. And some of the contention that happened, like at caucuses and some of former President Trump's remarks, might not help with that.
A lot of Trump supporters would often just sort of laugh off, oh, the mean tweets or the comments. But when you start to see his supporters behave in kind, does that help the cause?
You know, if somebody is yelling at me and bullying me, I'm unlikely to come over to their team. And so I don't think that's the best tactic. I think there are better ways to woo those voters. But definitely Trump and Biden are going to go after those voters who went for Nikki Haley. We saw Biden immediately come out and say, hey, come to our team. We'll take your contributions. We'll take your votes.
And Biden has some enthusiasm issues showing up in polling as well. And there's the Israel policy that has a lot of people saying uncommitted. How likely do you think they are to come around for Biden in the end after all, when they really sort out what's on the line?
This is the million-dollar question for the Biden campaign. How do they re-energize and attract and rebuild that coalition that they had, particularly dependent on young voters, black voters, Latino voters, who are really dissatisfied right now and really push that non-committed campaign? So I think that you can expect the president to keep trying to make progress through the Israel-Gaza policy, and then maybe try to take other steps. We see more incremental student debt forgiveness. I think he'll take other steps like that to try to convince them to come back to his team.
President Biden did promise to build the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. We've heard that 100 times, but there's been a lot of talk about whether inflation wiped out any of those economic gains. How much credit do you think he's getting from voters for avoiding a recession many Republicans predicted in 2022 and 23?
Almost none. If you look at the polling, if you hear the discourse, I think that even though we can look at the data and say the stock market's performing well, unemployment's low, inflation compared to other countries is doing well, that's not what people are feeling. And it's about a lot of voting and in politics is about how you feel and your reality of your day-to-day spending expenses. And so I think that they're going to have to make some more compelling arguments and really prove the case that they've had a positive impact on the economy.
We should mention before we go too, we're running low on time, but Senator Josh Hawley was able to procure a vote on the Radioactive and Exposure Compensation Act, RECA. The first price tag was estimated $150 billion, give or take. And that would add to the deficit, right? But now they're saying, well, it may not be that expensive at the end of all this. How big of a win is that for Josh Hawley as he goes back to face voters in November?
I think it's a big win for Josh Hawley. Cori Bush has also supported this. It's something that's unified St. Louis in. So I think it's a win for the region as well.
And we'll see if the House can take action on that as well. Anita Mannion, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
We're back in just a moment. The Illinois primary is just a week from Tuesday, and yes, Joe Biden and Donald Trump will top the ticket, but they face no opposition any longer, leaving voters to look farther down the ballot. Many voters in the Metro East will make a major decision on who will likely represent a large part of Southern Illinois in Congress. Incumbent Mike Boss faces a primary challenge from Darren Bailey. Outside of that race, this primary election is pretty lackluster across the state. It's low turnout of a different kind. Fewer candidates showed up to run. A new report from Capital News Illinois found the March 19th primary features the lowest number of competitive races in decades. 88% of primaries for judicial and state legislative races are uncontested. So let's check the record. Uncontested races often lead to a troubling trend with more lethargic lawmakers. A 2011 journal published by Washington University studied how uncontested elections eventually impacts the way a legislator works. It said politicians who don't face a challenge often, quote, show up to vote less often and introduce fewer bills. In other words, if you don't like the elected officials you've got, running against them might improve their behavior in office. The study found our results indicate that state legislators lacking serious political competition are less active in lawmaking. So if you don't like the options on your ballot, or if you don't think there are enough options there altogether, you might like what an Illinois senator said way back on Super Tuesday in early 2008. Change will not come if we wait for some other person or some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek. We know how that race turned out, that senator becoming president. That does it for us this week. That's all of our time. We'll be right back here at the same time next week. Until then, we're off the record.